Welcome, everyone. Hey, Don.
Hey everyone. Hey Julian, how are you doing?
I'm doing better than ever.
Better than ever? We, everybody. So welcome to our sixth show of the second season. Countdown to Contact.
It's something we can talk about today a little bit more in depth, but I think we were going to talk about a little bit more of this download wave that's coming through.
Well, it sounds like a good place to start because
Um,
it's been pretty active with you
for the
here
last,
recently.
yeah, for the last couple days.
Yeah, I
Um,
know it cost me a night of sleep last night, so
um, so I've been sharing about it for the last 24 hours, I guess, at this point, with people around me. Um, doing my part to explain another visit above the clouds, like in a space of clarity, um, to discuss things that are going on and to discuss kind of where things are going, too. Because, you know, some people they're more about what's going on and some are more about where things are going, and we'll talk about both.
perfect.
um, Regarding the shift, there's a shift that's taking place already right now,
Yeah, I don't
but
know if everybody else in the chat room has been feeling odd because of the energies, but I know I have, and definitely you've been experiencing some things.
yeah, I was sick for the weekend for like
Uh-huh.
several days, like night chills and bowel problems and just a lot of low energy, really.
Hmm.
But I wasn't low energy with fear. It was more like I've got a cold. Like, how rare, how interesting, you know? Like, let's just, get through it and
Uh-huh.
take care of myself and that, the usual thing. Um, Only this time, the coming out of it came with some incredible uh, information. It came through at the same time. As it turns out, with my going through discomfort, I went through a lot of fears for the last time. Went through a lot of old vibrations that had gotten me to where I was now, right?
Hmm.
Fears that had motivated me to push me up to this horizon, where I see things as I do at this point. Um, and I was kind of saying goodbye to them. I was kind of saying, it's like a rocket that's set off. It's got two, multiple stage rockets, and you drop
Sure.
off a stage of that rocket, and you kind of end up in another world. You kind of end up with a whole different kind of way of going about looking at how everything's taken place and exactly how you fit in. It's not what I expected, to be clear. I mean, there's some things that you know that are clearly the same, but there's definitely some that has gone to a whole nother level, something else.
Yes, that's what we want to talk about.
Um, so this idea that I think we'll go with the death story a little bit more. I know I've talked about the death as a story before,
Right.
um, but it's even less complicated than just watching a movie and walking out of the movie theater when it's over. It's about that complicated.
That's about it.
Mm-hmm. So when you revisit the idea of your life, like the way that you review watching a movie or playing a video game, for instance, it's another entertainment, that has
Hmm.
many levels. Reading a book, okay, it's also the same
Right.
thing. Enjoying a piece of art. Um, you're really going in there with certain expectations, and you come out differently afterwards. You come out having readjusted the way that you see things, at
Hmm.
least as it pertains to the content matter that you thought you were going to read about, right? So you went through a story. And in this case, you have a life and you go through a story. Now that story doesn't say, to be continued or wait for part 2 or anything like that. It just says, how you doing at this stage? How you doing at this act of this life as you know it? And you get to a point where you say, well, the water's fine. I don't know what you're asking me, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, oh, you don't know what is really being asked here? And then they show you what your answer
Yeah.
has an impact on doing. And you realize you're God again. Like you've stopped forgetting that you're like a god, that you have god-like properties that are within your possession to learn how to practice more and more and more.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So that means you're the director of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The movies that the Pleiadians participate in, they're not linear movies. They're like multiple choice journeys, right? And sometimes certain journeys only show up in the movie if enough people have watched it. So there's actual whole branches that don't occur until a certain number of people have watched the movie, like branching timelines. And the audience decides right there and then during the event or the movie what they're going to do. And it may not be different today and tomorrow. Right? Today, people go to the movie, they choose this timeline. Tomorrow, they go to the movie, they choose that timeline. And so what they basically learn to do is they learn how to communicate so that, when it comes to these making decisions as a group, they have a good, strong line of communication, which is, their level of communication that they have for themselves. As a result, communication led to their evolution. Communication itself being at the basis for learning how to adapt and make sense of yourself with another person is kind of like a plateau. It's like very common level plateau of, language is no longer a barrier, communication is no longer a barrier between you and anyone. Okay? So, I think I told you before that Pleiadians can learn your language really, really quickly. In fact,
Right, you were saying that today, yes.
yeah, it takes a Pleiadian who's never known anything about Earth to learn all languages on Earth in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And they use technology. It's not entirely mystical, but it might be seen mystical because the technology doesn't exist here. But they made that technology. It's their universal translator. It's their their big thing. One of their big things. And it kind of becomes a privilege for everyone. It starts to really honestly look like how in Star Trek and in Star Wars or something, people don't spend a lot of time scripting that you have to deal with people not knowing the language. They just know they can just get by, right? There's no issues with getting by and understanding each other anymore. However, guess what? That is the biggest problem we have today as individuals amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
Is our ability to actually communicate with each other. And it starts with first even believing you have a reason to communicate yourself. Right? Like, what makes me, important enough that I should speak up over what you're thinking? It's that whole, not knowing exactly where you fit in the world unless you're, an expert or something. I can only speak if I'm an expert. But what's wrong with speaking in perspective at any part in a journey of whatever you call a mastery of something? I mean, a mastery for you may not be a mastery for someone else even. But what prevents you from just being yourself? And sometimes, funny enough, it's that you don't feel like you'll be heard. You don't feel like you'll be understood, right? And you don't know how to get people to understand. But because this is a reflective universe, most of the rules involve reflecting how you're doing. Like, you know how you've got like an airplane, it's got all these readouts and stuff? You of all people would know. There's a lot of information there that can mess people up,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you had all access to all that, you could say navigate your life a little better. We'll just say someone has developed, 101 spiritual tools. And all these tools help them do things like all the different, flips and switches on a plane. I mean, why do you have so many screens? People don't have that many monitors, but, why can't you do everything on one monitor? You'd probably say they probably could, and they might do it sometimes. Control a plane from a laptop. But the point here is that physical location associates muscle memory, right? Flipping switches, muscle memory. It's a lot better to do it that way than just doing touchpad all the time. Visual strength is not as strong as visual plus physical. Otherwise, we could drive our F1 racers with tablets. Same deal. The point here is not to talk about the interface so much, but to realize that you are always entitled. And you're entitled up to the degree that you believe in yourself. So you actually entitle yourself. No one entitles you for you. And all you're doing is observing the reflection of how much you've given yourself reason to be feeling entitled. And if you feel you deserve to be entitled more, that means you have not given the same privilege to others. You have not given other people credit because you might have felt jealous about it. Which is another thing where you prevent your own entitlement by being jealous of others of it. It's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because because that's a paradox all on its own.
Right.
And you have to see it as a larger picture.
And first of all, when you're talking about what you're entitled to, what
entitlement is... Oh, that's a good question, yeah. So entitlement is a bit more to do with believing in yourself.
That's it. It's not really about the jewels or the artwork, but this is about believing in yourself.
Yes. And there's ways to do that and ways to register how much energy you have. Sometimes energy is a way of describing sort of like the reservoirs of what you're prepared to do. Sometimes reading the energy tells you how close you are to flipping a switch on something. You can get a sensation of that, and you can use your beliefs and your feelings to tell you what that means, or any given situation. You could just ask yourself and listen to how you feel about something. Just take a moment to be quiet and hear how you see where you are on that specific situation or subject. But if you had a question, I was going to go somewhere with that.
Well, yeah, the only point that I was going to make is that I think a lot of people, for example, through the whole process of this transition and this ascension, we are looking we're looking for the next step to reveal itself, or for somebody to give us the directions to find the next step, as opposed to what you're saying there is allowing ourselves to experience that next step, because we're the ones that are they keep that next step shrouded in fog, if that's where it is right now.
Yes. We have our own beliefs that keep us from experiences that we feel we're entitled to feel. And so we feel the tugging. We know the direction. We know where we want to go.
Of course, because
but we feel
we're moving with that energy.
But we feel the invisible wall because we have our own self-hypnosis to blame for the belief that prevents us from going forward. Is decidedly paradoxical. Therefore, it's not even in perception until you realize that there's two things going together and nothing really good is coming out straight. Right? It's coming out screwy. It's coming out with a range of realities that don't say left or turn right. It's all a mixture, and it's so complex you don't want to use it. So it's basically like information overload. I can't even process this. That's what most paradoxes do.
You hear people talk about this, that if all these sheeple would just wake up, everything would change for me. And that's where we're going to get into here, is the fact that it's really about wakening up for yourself
Mhm.
and bringing those experiences out for you, because they're sitting there right now.
Yes. They're sitting there. I mean, people will be familiar with this, with the
Hmm.
sort of message like saying, get on a spiritual path and get your butt into
Yes.
gear, right?
Hmm.
And I wanted to do my best to not have it always be interpreted as a spiritual path. So
Right.
I like to talk a little bit about the gamut of what that is, that we're really saying get yourself introduced with it more and more. Now, I'm not saying that with people on this audience. This audience is very hip, we'll say,
Hmm.
to a lot of what we're talking about. Um, in fact, I may be boring them the way that I'm sharing something that's clearly obvious to them. But nevertheless, if you're still here listening, it's because there's probably something more that you could still learn from this. In
Absolutely.
that there's a bit more going on here that and I'm not professing to be the first person with sharing any of this kind of information at all.
Hmm. Right.
I'm just knowing it much more profoundly for myself. So, for me, it easily gets described in mathematics in a couple of ways. And I believe, Don, you and I can't recall if we've done this on the show, but I want to go over the sort of like the rule of 10 again,
Okay.
or the rule of 9 plus a portal between various nines,
Right.
right?
And
So, we have this number 10 system in our society, and it's actually a lot more important than we've given it, you know, maybe credit for on the scale of how it
jazz
affects
hands.
consciousness.
Hmm.
10 with your hands. It was the numbers we counted with our bodies.
Hmm.
And really, we're dealing with the vibration of 5. 5 and 5. 5 masculine, 5 feminine, 5 dominant hand, 5, less dominant hand, submissive hand, receiving, directing, excuse me. You know which hand applies to all those subjects when I talk about what hand is what, right? So,
Hmm.
the same thing actually applies with the feet too. So you've got 10 down there too, and those feet are for more grounding energy experiences. Hands are much more for energy experiences of more straightforward self-discovery
Right.
and
Creation.
creation integration. Yeah.
Hmm.
So as it pertains to us living in a dimension of 10, or sporadically two ways to look at the number 5, right? A black version of 5 and a white version of 5. They're not exactly the same, you know. My handprints are different from hand to hand, but are they almost the exact same hand? They're pretty close. The bones are probably very close to the same size. The muscles are about slightly more in my right hand, maybe because I use it more for this and that. But there's a lot the same. Very few differences,
Right.
really. That's basically what I'm saying. Very few differences. So you can associate with them as a 10. But you definitely use them, these 5 individually and these 5 individually. We're looking at a world that everything can be divided up into 10. Our consciousness has seen to it that we can do a scale of 1 to 10 on everything. Or we could do a 5-star system. Have you noticed the proponency for that?
Right.
I mean, it's what it is. You can even count to 100 because you've got 2 sets of 10. You have
Hmm.
one for the 10's integer and one for the 1's integer. So with your toes and your hands, you can actually come up with a percentile system for yourself. All right? It might sound odd for me to consider that you use your hands and fingers to get information from yourself, because people are not used to doing that. They're not used to saying, "How do I get information from my hands and and my feet?" Joanne,
Right.
great. What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure some people like that. And I said that your hands are more the creative endeavor, your feet are more the grounding endeavor. You want to learn what to ground in, it has a lot to do with where you physically are located. Like your physical surroundings. Be
Mm-hmm.
grounded in what that is around you. Take stock of what is around you. If it's a stranger's house, it's now your house. Not, you know, in a literal sense that you can just decide to live there, but once inside and knowing this house, you can invite yourself to stay here if you have good cause. And if you don't, you can learn exactly what you can in the time that you're there. Read into the synchronicities of the environment, like reading into dreams. Right? You look around. Oh, this person's got a pink flamingo. Not even on their yard. It's inside their house. That's weird. What does that mean? And you indubitably would have your own association with pink flamingos that no one else would have. Right? You're like, this reminds me of Florida. Hey, you ever lived in Florida? There's like so many plastic pink flamingos. It's like crazy. Probably the highest per capita lawn usage of pink flamingos is in Florida. Or that is an old
I
way
haven't
of maybe
seen too
looking
many.
at it.
Yeah, it was an old thing. I haven't seen too many recently, but yeah, I get your point.
Okay. So in this way, we're really just opening up a channel at this time. And whether you want to or not, be my guest for whatever you choose. It's not that I'm saying anyone has to be a part of doing anything different at all.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I mean,
why I'm
we're here sharing our experiences. Yeah.
hearing our experience. And for me, life just got to understanding things out of one of a hundred better. Before, comparatively, I felt like I was only looking at things from a rating of 1 to 10. But now I'm 10 times that in rating things.
Right.
It's a serious, I don't want to say head rush, but it is a seriously different perspective. And yet everything that I've already lived fits perfectly within that. All that I've realized since that's the stage that I've gone through, or this download that I'm in, at this time that I'm in it, is that I have that much more clarity on everything. Instead of saying 1 to 10, now you've got 1 to 100 is also like 1 to 10 with a tens decimal place being
Right.
registered. Now I'm voting on an 8.6, if that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we use larger numbers when we're dealing with more important things. So use percentile when it has a certain level of importance relative to all the other ways that we might use that information. Okay? And as a rating of a few stars, if it's not a very critical decision, which way it goes. Between 4 and 5 stars, no biggie. No bigs. No one's having a sweat over that. So you'll note when 5 is used and all that. We'll also find out that we live in the decahedron symbolic system because of the 10. So our reality is based on the 10-sided polygon, the decahedron, I believe it's called. It's a 10-sided polygon. And when you look at it, it looks like a star, right? It's a five equal sides pentagram. And so when you look at that, you start to... Are you still there? Have I got you? Okay, yeah, you're just losing a bit of signal there for a second. So it's the 5 sides in the 10 sides, right? And what you've actually got in the decahedron, unlike a real physical die, is you have one side of one of the 10 sides, the numbers 1 through 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's got 5 edges, 5 sides to the side itself, 5 corners, and it's got both the inward polarity and the outward polarity. You've got the inside of the die, assuming it was hollow, you've got the inside and you've got the outside. That's what our experience is in a mathematical concept. Okay? What's happening next? You'd say, well, we're going from 5 senses to 6 senses, Julien. So that's like growing an extra finger. That changes the paradigm completely. That changes everything. How you communicate, how you
Yeah.
do everything. So no
Your
wonder,
dodecahedron.
yeah, so no wonder you're all like, anybody can be moderately confused by this. But good news is they invented a 6-sided, or a 12-sided die. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you get extra fingers and toes, don't worry your head about it too much. My point here is in the recognition that we're not necessarily going to 6 fingers, first off, but that we are in a
So
space. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so everybody can keep their gloves.
We can keep their gloves.
Yeah.
Um, we're in a space where we're looking at um, another way of guiding ourselves. And it's up to us to learn what we want as guidance. Much of the time, we're
Right.
like, I want guidance, I want guidance, I want guidance, I want guidance. Well, guess what? If you're still here and you haven't found a way to get guidance, it's time for you to decide what your guidance is going to be. And just stick
Well,
with it.
yeah. I mean, in the past, we've been told where our guidance comes from. It comes from our parents. It comes from our teachers. It comes from our churches, our government, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And we're moving out of that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
let's face it. All of those institutions are changed and changing, and they're no longer operating in the same way that they were for good reasons.
Yeah. And it's not
So
because, and I wouldn't say it's as much them outdating as you making them outdated by where you're
exactly.
going. Yeah.
That's where it is. That's where it's coming from. So where does this new guidance come from?
A great deal of it.
From Eckhart Tolle or no?
No.
Okay, yeah, this is a joke.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I like Eckhart, but
I love Eckhart Tolle.
yeah.
Um, but the literal, because I already told you earlier.
Hmm.
So I met an individual in Cloud 9. A great deal of this came about through my head surfacing above Cloud 9 again, which is a heavenly realm, we'll say, where there's lots and lots of, we'll call them ascended people. Okay, they're not living the trappings of a normal life at all. They're quite free to do whatever they want, and in some cases you might identify them with dead people. Okay, like spirits of people that have once lived. But essentially, it's a great place to ask questions, and lots of people ask spirits from there. There's lots of channeling. They're doing all sorts of communication. Whatever communication they can manage, whether it's poltergeist or what have you, they will do it if they feel that it's a comfortable transition for someone to experience. Like it'll be an
Right.
effective journey for them, right? Um, and Cloud 9 does look like you're on a cloud. I mean, I'm not going to ignore it. But there's also, there's the heavenly gates too. Heavenly gates is basically saying, when you're done here, you can go through the gates. So a lot of people, what they're doing is they're helping out right now. Lots of people ascend, basically, helping them
Hmm.
out with their troubles, helping out with guidance, insight. Um, Whoever you have sort of like an idolization of that might have died, you're probably connected with their archetypal energy and the knowledge that you expect they would have. Much like, what would Jesus say?
Right.
And you can get some really nice answers from the Jesus that you know. Same thing with the people that you know. You can get
Hmm.
really nice information.
What would
Now,
Prince say?
what would Prince say? That's right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because, he's still in demand. People are still asking him questions, so he's still
Right.
there participating as it suits. When he feels like, oh, no one really knows who I am anymore, then he'll move on. He'll move into this other way of living life. And I'm saying a way of living life that doesn't have to be any different than right now, the way it is right now. Because
Mm-hmm.
the only reason why I say different way of living life is more along the lines of understanding how it actually comes to be at a whole nother level for yourself. Like you see your actions much, much more effectively than you might have before. You look at your mind as a much more significant tool, but you'll understand its parameters a little better. Understand why the mind, you can't just completely chuck it, right? You'll understand
Sure.
why and how the mind operates as a functional system. And one of the real quick ways to understand how the mind is working is to sort out what its intentions are. Funny, mind having intentions? No, it's just what the mind has grounded as your intentions for life. So sort that out. And that's some introspective stuff. That's some, self-inquiry, things like that. But uh, even if you don't know what it is at this time, it doesn't mean you can't rewrite it. Now, I know it starts to sound like law of attraction kind of mumbo jumbo. It's just the way things work from my perspective. Like everything works under the idea of law of attraction. Like I could talk about law of attraction, how it applies to almost everything. But
Mm-hmm.
needless to prove that, I'm not interested in, going that path right now. Um, there is a process that your mind will accept as law, which means, and most of the time, it's only the people's mind that's in the way at this time from them having any experience in realizing how an effective creator being they are. Is they've been convinced they're less than what they appear to think that they are as a
Yeah. So
person.
let's maybe talk a little bit about that. Um,
Okay.
yeah, only because it is. I mean, it may seem like a small hurdle to get over, but quite honestly, most people when they run
It's,
into it,
it's
it's
mind-boggling.
like it's mind-boggling because they can't envision what's on the other side of that wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there is a very specific purpose for that too, but less significant than that purpose is that you are to discover that you fill in the blanks.
Hmm.
That the reason why you don't know so much about what has been and what shall be is because really you're the reason that they both exist, your past and your
Right.
future. You're
Right.
in the middle of that.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, if you could talk like that about that for a minute, I'm going to use the washroom real quick. I haven't done this very often, but
Okay. Yeah. Go right ahead.
I will just pause for a second.
Um, yeah, so if anybody's got comments in the chat room, go ahead. But I think that's a really significant part of what we're getting to, and I know we may be going a little bit slowly here, but Julian's got some very big things to share. Um, but that whole idea of letting go of our past and letting go of our future. I mean, I was joking about Eckhart Tolle before, but of course, that's what he's been writing about since anybody became aware of what information he's been putting out, and it's about being in the now. And what does that mean? So much of our past, if we look at it, if it's driven, if our the story of our past is driven, for example, by what other people have um, uh, said about it, or their impressions of it, or if we're being driven by what people will think about in the future about of our actions, we're not getting that close awareness to ourselves where we need to be going. And this is the information that's going to be coming through here is we're creating it. We are creating it. And we've been kind of taught through the law of attraction and that sort of thing to kind of play with it. The car you want, or the job you want, or the relationship you want. Um, can you bring that into manifestation, or the parking space that you want, whatever it is that you're looking for, and and but we're getting to a bigger part of the story now, and this is where the download that Julien is going to be talking about here is so important, is that we're creating it all. Um, if if you're if you feel like you're standing in the just the middle of a fog bank, and you don't know where to move, or what to do to get what you want, um, the surprising thing is that it's right there. Once that fog lifts, we realize that what we've wanted all along is right around us. And this is a good part for Julien to go um, into. You leaving again?
I'm here. No, I was just changing.
Okay.
Just closing the window.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Uh,
So you were saying
but
what I should go into?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's getting back into the whole idea of we're creating it ourselves.
Okay. So
And what that means now, because you're kind of the information that you're going to be passing along kind of really applies more energy to that. I was the point I
I
was
see.
saying was that with the law of attraction, the talk was always about getting the car you want, or the job you want, or the relationship you want, and how do you manifest that for yourself. Whereas we're talking, you're upping the game here
Mm.
with what you're going to be presenting, as
Yeah.
far
Well,
as.
from my perspective,
Mhm.
um, is that it's a further attunement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's adding another thing that maybe is really small in the larger scheme of many people using law of attraction, but for people who are very intelligent, this helps. Because people who are very intelligent are people that consider many factors. Okay? So when I use the term intelligent, I'm not judging people. I don't care how many factors you're interested in considering, but it's more like when I've talked about everything has 20 different reasons for existing. Well, this pushes your propensity for more or less depending on your intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And your intelligence is just how much slack you've given your mind to go about and construct a model of reality. Okay? So people are very intelligent about their model of reality. That's just how it works. And they would be considered intelligent. In areas that don't fit into their model of reality, they'd be considered sometimes up to imbecile about it. There's nothing wrong. There's no point in really comparing intelligences or in the models of reality who's more accurate or not. There is simply finding out what your intention is and the journey that you're taking within it. Okay? It's almost like you're learning who you are. You're learning what your intention had set out for you. Now, I know a lot of people ask these questions, what's my spiritual journey? What's my path? What's my destiny?
Mm-hmm.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm known as a psychic, so they'll call me up and ask me those questions. And for a great long time, I had answers for them that were pretty blunt and straightforward. But more and more, it's come to the place where people ought to know why I'm telling them why I'm telling them. May want, despite it being 9 out of 10, the correct answer, there's still a 10% that we didn't have time to get into. The but part. And letting someone explore that. As a general rule in my sessions, I only focus on the highest probability. I only give life to the highest probability. And I know that what it is what it is, because everyone that's in part of the concert of a session, guides and all people attending, everyone's alignment is in tune with that as well. They want the
Mm-hmm.
best to come from this experience. They want the best. And sometimes it is even the best for me to tell them bad news. I sometimes step back and say, oh, wait a second, I didn't know I was supposed to share this. And they're like, you're going to do a little growing up here, Julien, until you're going to get a little bit more mature about this.
Mm-hmm.
Put away, your baby toys on this subject. Here's a new model of understanding this. And it comes through, and I'm like, oh, well, I feel good about that. Thank you after all, despite, it's always good. So I just, even though I have a hesitation, I was like, whoa, 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 model of my reality is about to get shattered here. Something's about to come through. They like start saying it. I'm like, wait. Doesn't have anything to do with that. And they're like, it's all about that. I'm like, oh, that's today? Like, yeah, you're going to talk about that today. So
Okay.
that's what it is. And that's what happens. And, you don't plan your days like you think you do. We take very little control over our days. There's an environment where you have even less control, an environment where you have more control. But there is a point, and we'll just call it the ascended point. This is much more clear to me now, what these people on Cloud 9 are like, and the people that are going through the gates are like. They're not going through gates, okay? That's a symbolic way of me interpreting the soul's journey, okay? The individual's journey, the person's journey. It's not just their soul that I'm watching. It's the person who had feet on the ground. It's that person.
Right.
A person with feet on the ground. What is his story, part 2? What is the next part of his life going to be? If I follow him through the gates, then I'll find out what he does. But if I'll follow his story alone, I'll be very confused. For instance, the person who I was there, and Cloud 9 had never been busier. It was like a news reporting room, at like a news agency, like the Gazette or the Times or something like that. The way you saw it in the 80s, where like everyone's typing, there's phones off the hook, and there's papers everywhere. There's so much business, there's so much to get down to. It's like, oh my God, there's a big hula baloo going on. And I'm like, oh, this looks cool. What's going on? I didn't get anybody to stop for me, really. It's funny. You show up to Cloud 9 and you're like, hey guys,
hey, it's me. I'm here.
I came over to heaven again, guys. And heaven isn't like, waiting for you.
No, they're not dropping anything to see you.
No, they're not like, here's the carpet, Julien. Come, we want to talk with you. You're just like, what? I just showed up at some kind of virtual Central Park, and that's it. I just sort of spawn here, like in a video game. I just like appear, like, oh, next life, here you are. Nobody, you have no idea what you're doing there. I didn't know, but it just happens. You just vibrate, and then you go through a dark spot, which is in the clouds. You're confused. You're scared. Things are difficult. You're not sure whether to let go or to let it happen or what to do. And I said, oh no, I've felt discomfort before. No problem.
Right.
I can do some. I can do with some discomfort. So who did I meet?
So you found somebody to talk to then?
I sort of talked to, actually. I met a mime. He wouldn't talk at first. I'm like, great. The only person who gives me the time of day is a mime. Like a Charlie Chaplin-like person. And I'm just like, oh, just my luck, right? But he's like, but he shows me some movement with his hands, and I'm like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And he does a bit more movement with his arms and his body, and it's like, yeah, I know what you're saying. He's like, good. And then he goes like into dance, right? He goes into this weird dance that I've never seen before. Looks like some, Oriental, sort of dance or something. And I'm getting it. I don't know how I know the language of that, but I understand the language of it, and I get a very in-depth story. And I realize that he's mastered language of the human body art form. Like, he is really a master. And, he could talk to people who don't even know it, what the language is. That's how good he is. He's so good, the message still gets to you. And that was kind of important to me to realize that. not just the information he gave me of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but he also gave me two things, what's going on, and he gave me a tip. He basically gave me some guidance on what I can do. Like, after having a talk about this is sort of like, what's my takeaway, Julien, or what's my takeaway, Charlie, and what am I up for here? What's on the table? Like what's the step that looks like a step, right?
Right.
And he said, or motion figured, that everyone just needs to rewrite the contract of their life. And rewrite a contract of anything. Just write a contract.
So you don't even have to acknowledge
You don't even
anything
have to
that may
acknowledge
have
the
any
existing
agreement
one.
that you made coming into this lifetime or several lifetimes or anything. You don't even
Well,
have to acknowledge anything like that.
you don't have to. And the thing is, you can just say, whatever my contract is, I wipe it clean. Now, it will
Mm-hmm.
remain in limbo. And if you say that, you'll remain in a really strange limbo state. It's really odd. Nothing will ever change when you're in that limbo state. You say, I remove
Well,
all contracts, agreements that I've made ever associated with my life. Just my life. Not anyone else. My life is it circumvents all other ones. It undermines all other arrangements. Agreements I've made to myself as to what am I aligned with? Like, what am I headed for? What is my destiny? What am I chosen for
mm-hmm.
my life? You could do that. And if you do
You
that,
could do it.
what usually happens, doesn't have to happen, please be my guest and try this, is you end up in what's called the happy hunting grounds. Okay? Which is an environment where everything stays exactly the way it is with no movement. It's like a non-evolving community. It's like you'll notice the computers don't get better, the cell phones don't get better, television stays the same shows for the next 100 seasons. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Time will not appear to be evolving, right?
So your relationships with people won't
It'll be
change.
exactly the same,
Okay.
okay? Um, so you'll end up in what's called the happy hunting grounds, which is basically an intentionless world, and yet also removal of all intentions that would affect you. Now, all that you're left with is the breath of life. And when all associations that you've ever made in your life as truths since you were born, like beliefs, basically, everything that you've associated, if that kills you off, then that's what kills you off, right? You still age, you still mature, but
Right.
you don't have any sort of it's like living life without like a musical accompaniment in a way, right? Like
Okay.
movies have
And
a sound score. We have a sound score, and that's the intention that drives the undercurrent of all our experiences and our decisions.
okay, and even if nobody wants to experience that, it does give an idea of just that everything that has happened to you in your life has been because of your original agreement that you decided on in order to come into this lifetime. So
Mm-hmm.
it on the one hand, okay, maybe you don't want to go into that happy hunting grounds, but on the other hand, you can use the contrast of the happy hunting grounds to say, okay, I haven't been a victim of everything in my life. That there's been a uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, okay, yeah,
Yeah, and the Pleiadians would describe that as well as like the example of you got a ticket in a grand theater and you want to try a different seat next time you're here.
mm-hmm,
You got like C9 and you saw some people in the upper side, in the upper wings or something. You want, double F7 or something.
right,
And,
um,
and so it's like you can change your point of view,
mhm.
and you have the authority to go about researching how to go about how that's going to take place.
Okay, but
And
that's not really what you're here to talk about, though,
no,
right?
no,
No,
it's more or less the procedure for doing the choice-based action.
right, right. So,
The brass
so
tacks, the you know.
okay, somebody who actually wants to follow through with what you're going to be sharing in the changes might want to write this out first and then revoke the contract previous to have just something
Well,
in hand.
both those are good. Both are fine. And I'll explain real
Yeah.
briefly. If you write a program or an association of what your life will be without revoking the other one, you'll find that probably a lot of are similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other program will still always run. It's always the first program has higher precedence over any other program. That's
Okay.
the root structure of the mind's way of organizing information, and that's just how it's always going to work. The way the mind
Mm-hmm.
has preferred a hierarchy of information. It does hierarchy. That's just the way the mind prefers to organize its information. Um,
Okay. So
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 if you set
writing a
a
new.
so if you write
Go
a
ahead.
new one, whatever still happens, you'll find out, oh, that must be part of the code. Something that I can't seem to change right now is because the original code is saying I still need to do it,
Right.
which guides you to also pinpoint what it is by what you can't change. Does that make sense? So
Sure.
you're going to find out that you can change things. Set intentions, set a contract that does something that doesn't normally change your whole life. Just, I like to have green hair or something. Or, I mean, that's pretty extreme in some cases, but, it can be I would like a sign from a bird to look at me in the face, and tell me when I'm thinking of something that it gives me a confirmation. It can be that. That's a nice, gentle way of doing it, but you can go
Mm-hmm.
very ungentle if you want to, if you get my drift. Um, and through about 300 words, you write down the script. Your mind works with scripts. Okay? Everything's a script. Everything's an equation, like algebra. Okay? Like a programming language. It's all scripts running together. Your mind holds logical deductions and assumptions and designates assumptions and logarithmic processes to take place. When you write a statement, and this could be, it could sound like a mission statement, like a traditional mission statement. You can basically allow yourself to learn what you really want. And the closer to home you hit the ball on what you really want, which will be in your heart, mind you, the guidance will all be in your heart. You basically write what your heart sings to do. You'll see it more and more. You'll experience it much more than if you did not actually know what it was before you took a step towards it. Now, I'm saying this can be the most profound discussion you ever have with yourself. So it's allowed to be edited. It's encouraged to be edited over time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't take it too seriously. Like, allow yourself to, change some of the wording, upgrading the wording and whatnot. But the average is a 300-word statement of what your intention is and what you want it to be. And this is life. So whatever fits underneath that, you want to use words that allows life to fit in the cracks and show you how that can take place, right? The more specific you get, the less you're opening up the cracks. You're guiding it, like a bit more of a maze. Too much guidance of a specific nature, you'll face the paradoxes that will not allow you to have challenging, conflicting thoughts in the same sentence structure working against itself. You'll face the paradoxes in your own statements. That is what we call confusing parts of our life.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not insurmountable. Through patience and stillness, and through asking, we can get those answers. My point here is to write that 300-word document. The mind registers writing as a system of instruction. Okay, it recognizes its context, its syntax. When I say 300, I don't mean 300. I mean 300 words that you don't really have to count the thes, the ands, and that sort of thing. Count really just nouns, vowels, or nouns, verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. Just, count those words. You don't have to count, the basic computational things like and for. You don't need those. It's implied. It's implied, and so you don't have to use as many words. And so it doesn't have to sound super English logical. You could just write poetry. You could just put all the words you like, 300
Or you could
words you
do a
like.
list.
Or you do a list. You just do a
Yeah.
list. Things you like. The reason for a paragraph is it sometimes makes direct association between things that are hierarchical in nature that you'd like to remain hierarchical. Like this within this, and this as it relates to this, and choosing that context sometimes.
So, what's the main reason for doing this?
All right. The main reason for doing this is to realize that your mind is the last obstacle that you have
Last obstacle to what?
to everything,
To the ascension point.
to the ascension point, to whatever you want. When your
Mm-hmm.
mind has found a relationship with being a participant, it lets go of the illusion that you're not already moving through your reality very quickly. You'll see the synchronicities easier. You'll expect and realize things much more faster. Time will appear to accelerate. You'll find a whole new sense of self-esteem with yourself, because no longer will you recognize that the world treats you for right and wrong. You decide every right and wrong yourself. You give society a standpoint to stand and say this is right and wrong. It all starts from inward and all
Okay, so we have
projects
a
outwards.
couple of questions.
Yeah,
Um, do you have a real life example of this yet?
that would be good to describe.
Yeah.
Such as like writing a 300-page piece that delivers the experience that results right after it.
Well,
So again,
okay, I
that
don't know
that's
how deep you want to get into this because
mhm.
um, you know the example that you gave me, for example, was um, writing your own story, writing a book, and
Mhm.
you said so. Where do you think the question to me was um, it was about the Hobbit, and where do you think Tolkien is now to me? And I said,
Mhm.
well, you're saying that he's living in an existence like the Hobbit, or
Mhm.
like, yeah, okay. So this is kind of a shorthand version of your life story and how you want your life to be. It's what you're bringing with you from
Yeah.
the revocation of the old contract, bringing what you're bringing forward with you. It's almost, whether it's the picture that I've got is the old hobo, with the stick and the handkerchief hanging
Yeah.
there. It's like what's in that that handkerchief that you're carrying with you onto the rail car.
Yeah. What's so
Or
important that you
right,
got to
right. What
bring
is the
with
most
you?
important things?
Yeah.
What are the defining parts of you, and what are you bringing forward from this point in time on?
Okay. So
Yeah.
first, to answer a quick question you mentioned earlier, where did Tolkien
Yes.
go? Tolkien was always Gandalf. Okay. He
Okay.
was always that position. He always saw himself as Gandalf. So he is Gandalf who wrote the story about Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and all that. He's
Mhm.
the Gandalf. Okay. Who wrote Star Wars? Who wrote the epic that is Star Wars?
George Lucas.
No. George
No.
Lucas identified with Obi-Wan. George Lucas was
Okay.
Obi-Wan.
Okay.
Okay? In the original, he was old, and then he gave life to a youthful interpretation of himself as a Jedi. Okay?
Okay.
Look at sometimes the hero that persists over the multiple chapters.
Right.
Okay? Like, J.K. Rowling. Who's J.K. Rowling? Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
All right?
Gene Roddenberry was
Captain
Kirk.
Kirk. Yes.
Okay.
Um, or he was also Spock, funny enough. He was both Spock
Okay.
and Kirk at the same time.
Uh,
Uh,
multiple personalities. Okay.
well, fighting
No,
with,
I get it.
the tangents
Yeah,
within, the logic versus
it
the fury,
is.
the strength of fury. So, um,
Totally.
my point is that in that writing a contract, Many people have written contracts before, and they've probably seen a great deal of efficacy with them, but they lose in efficacy when you go to a point that is harboring against your initial intention for life, okay,
Mm-hmm.
for living your human life. So when you want to bounce out of that, you need to research yourself in a way, and research why things are taking place in your life.
Right.
Research. I mean, is that spiritual? Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's just trying to understand yourself better psychologically. Whatever that is for you, to understand yourself more deeply. The side effect of that is you have more access to more doors. And there's an eventual place that we'll call the
Mm-hmm.
ascended point. And like the gates of heaven, it's more like a movie theater. You go into the movie theater, you decide what movie you want to go into next, and you go hang out in the movie. You just realize that you didn't come from outside to the movie theater. You came from within the movie theater out of a movie. And that movie was called Earth the way it was up to that point. You don't know what
Right.
happens next unless you go back into that movie theater. But instead, you might want to go, see the Ninja Turtles movie. I don't know. Whatever's out there these days. Is that still out? Anyways, um, that world has its own associations, and you have a certain idea of what it's associated with, so you're not going in there blind. If no one had ever seen Toy Story, and they just saw the title, and they walked in, they would be blown away, I'm sure of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
In maybe as many positive ways as negative ways, right? They might be like, this is terrible, I don't, toys moving, I don't want to think about that, it creeps me out, or that excites me, it all depends, but the point is, you still want to query what reality you're headed for, and you're entitled to that. You need to realize that you're entitled to that, so practice it and prove it to yourself. And yes, when you're having trouble with your intentions coming to fruition, there's many ways that you can go about strengthening your awareness and attention. One, memorize your 300 words. Like,
Mm-hmm.
commit it to memory, which can be challenging if you're making little edits here and there every other day or so. But try on your statement. Give it some time to show itself to you. And look around and realize that all the answers are coming in concert to what you just made as a citation of importance. Okay? So when you make a citation of importance, it comes through. If you're like, oh, I think I'll take a shot, Julian, it'll be as important as you believe that it needs to step through. You'll still get the same results. You may just not get it in as short a span of time as you might expect, because you have other intentions in your life that take precedence,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you write these things, the rest of your life moves around. It doesn't necessarily cancel. It only cancels in the way that you paradoxically get caught up in how things can evolve unless you figure it out with your head. But you don't have to figure out things with your head. You can let them show you how they're going to resolve themselves too. And some people who are lazy are accused of sitting around and letting life guide them a bit more in some circumstances where you feel like one would be taking action.
So how is it that the mind doesn't battle against this?
It doesn't battle against it because it's a part of the process. It's more like a
Right.
test. Okay? It's the writing also isn't the only way. I'm going to cite any creative endeavor
Sure.
using the hands. That's painting, writing, typing, drawing, illustrating, gardening, what have you. Creative endeavor using the hands. The hands expressive experience. And it should be something that uses both hands. Something that does involve you at least having to use both your hands at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, anything like that, your truth will come through there. It will bring to you, because it's your most significantly aligned creative portal, you'll see what you do as a creation. Creation with your hands is a very, very powerful meaning behind the actions to your subconscious, which is also your mind as the receiver and interpreter of how well it's going. So let your mind in on, you're planning on tricking it, maybe even. But you'll always see what you need to see. You'll always see precisely what is this current status of things. So I know that taking a reading of status is not everyone's strong point, right? Just how do we stand on this? What's going on here, right? So what you can do is you can ask to get the status in symbolic ways, and that can be tarot, that can be, bibliomancy. I personally like, dowsing, or you can even make one up. You can be like, my numbers, my left hand pinky is a 1, my thumb is a 5, my right hand thumb is a 6, and then it goes to 10 on my right hand. I can just say these are the numbers. And if I have a question where I need to know a number from 1 to that, cause some serious harm to that finger in the near future. It works.
Some serious harm to that finger.
Yeah,
okay.
You got it caught in a door or something, but
sure.
you'd be like, I'm never going to forget the answer to that one. I know how this works.
Yeah, I'm going to be very careful what question I ask.
Yeah. Well, it could be anything. It could be
sure
like, something, like,
okay.
Let one of my nails break or something.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you'll take note of.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how you can go with it. Like, you can just say something that might take note of it. You might get, like, mud on one of your fingers one day when, you feel like picking something out of your shoes, and I'll be like, well, this finger stands out all of a sudden. This is probably my answer,
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be like, is it really? And then you'll be like, now you'll break a nail. I'm like, yep, that's the finger. That's, that was number, number 7. You're at a 7. The answer is 7. There's a lot of ways to pull yourself and pull your subconscious, and to pull your mind in a way that it's operating subconsciously. The reason why you want to do it subconsciously and why you don't want to do it consciously is because the subconscious is a suggestion state for the mind. It's the input phase, right? Subconscious sends input to the mind, and the mind doesn't judge it. It doesn't say, you're wrong. It just says, data received, and I'm going to apply it in this way. And then the mind sends it back to subconscious, which is just another level of the mind itself. And it says, make these adjustments, stat. And some people have released so much value in their mind, they can't even get their mind to make a change on a subtle thing that would allow them to go through a complete mental change of awareness.
Right.
Which means, like, waking up, or having, an ascension point or something, having a download. So, again, I've said this before, but intentions are 9/10 of the reality you're going to experience. And everything operates on a rule of 10. If you want more help, get a 10-sided die.
Right.
And this.
So when you're talking about the ascension point, you're essentially saying that it's an individual thing.
Yes. It is an individual thing.
The idea.
Oh, you're breaking up, Don.
Oh.
All right, start over.
Am I breaking up?
The idea of.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the idea that humanity is going through this ascension, type of thing, this kind of seems at odds with that. That looking at it as an individual journey, an individual path, or we don't want to use the word path, but an individual experience as opposed to being a collective experience.
So it does lead to a collective experience. Okay, the
Mm-hmm.
personal experience often is a product. You're always going to have your individual experience before everyone else. It may not seem like that sometimes, but that's because you've actually cleared a space for you to show up in another world. Let's just say, no one knew Pokemon Go was going to be a phenomenon, but you woke up one day, you heard about it, and it's a big deal. You're like, how did I not know about Pokemon Go? Like, I should have had my
Right.
my broker on top of that or something, on top of Nintendo stocks. It's just things like that happen where you're
You're
like,
breaking it, Julian. You're breaking up.
okay. So, your signal's not swell at the moment.
My signal.
Yeah. But how's it showing up
Huh.
in the chat room, people? Yeah, if we just get a register of how I'm coming through and if it's Don's signal or mine. Because Don is just not going to get a good signal of me in the event of that.
Yeah. Well, I caught about every third word on that what you were saying. Let's see. You guys both sound fine to me. Julian isn't breaking up for me. Okay, so maybe Don looks foggy.
Do you want to restart your Skype?
I can restart.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Yeah, I'm going to keep sharing.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, so while Don is out for the minute, um, there was something that I recommend looking at when because the question came up with, do you have any real life examples of this? When you get to a certain awareness, you realize your whole life was this. Like in my situation, um,
One ringy dingy.
and
Okay.
looks good to hear.
Okay.
Um, so in the chat room, there was the question of like, can I cite an example? I have old examples, but it branches into so many areas. Well, I guess I might as well just give the example. When I look at the world economy, it's based on all my interests when I was younger. Like everything that's successful are things that were of interest to me. Like high levels of entertainment in video games, and certain kinds of movies and all that. It's like
Mm.
they always go the way that I would have wanted them to go, even in success and failure. In some way, I'm the luckiest person alive. If you want to talk to me about my life, I'm the luckiest person alive that I know. Everything just seems to get easier for me all the time. And I haven't tried. That's probably annoying to some people that I don't try really that hard. And the more that I try a little bit, I realize it goes a really long way. It's like a lot of gas for not much gas. I, have a life story that's probably more like an interview on my life story. But if anyone knows my affinity with red-haired women, you'd find that I'd read a book about it by a red-haired teenager that I later saw many years later and ended up marrying. And she had red hair as well. And then when I got divorced, I met Crystal without even knowing she had red hair. The picture she sent me wasn't even red hair. She showed up and I'm like, you've got red hair. Like I am not surprised that this is taking place, because what also happened is I read that book that had a red hair heroine and red haired woman, and I drew a character for my, just in my sketchbook. I have those pictures, and they keep drawing this red-haired woman and this character that I'd sort of like given her as a background, a story, and that's who I got. That's verbatim. I illustrated my first wife. Okay. And after I was moving out of my relationship in 2013 with her, I went to Shasta and I saw fairies. And guess what I wanted everything to be about after that? Fairies. So, ex-wife Crystal is a fairy. She's
Mm-hmm.
basically a principal fairy queen. If you've been here, Don, you've seen it. This
Yes.
place is a fairy house. Log
It's totally.
houses are the closest thing that fairies will appreciate when it comes to houses.
Mm-hmm.
I Did I know that's what I was looking for? No, but my fairy wife did, and it was easy. So, was I looking for just a red-haired person? No, I was looking and processing my journey as it suited bit by bit. The funny thing is, one of the criteria I knew that I set forward, as I said, girls spend so much. I had this statement, mind you, it's not the same anymore. I had this statement going through high school about girls. I said, girls are interested in talking with the nice looking guys, right? They don't care about, what's on the inside. I was a geek and a nerd and,
Or what
you
video
know,
games they own. Yeah.
yeah, whatever. There really wasn't me spending much time with women. We didn't see eye to eye. I grew up around boys. I didn't. Girls were a beautiful mystery to me. But it came around to someone who had given me attention when I was 13, who gave me a giant 300-pound book. And for a dyslexic boy, reading a 300-page book, a 300-pound book, 300-page book, it was, and it was like a fantasy, romance novel. And it touched me very deeply, but it was very difficult to read, so I listened to Mozart during it. So Mozart was the musical score, and it made it a very real thing. It made it more real by including more sensory perception at this point. And so I felt like I was in this magical fairy tale, romance fantasy at 13. I knew nothing about romance. I had no idea about any of that sort of thing. But it was also, a fantasy sci-fi. There's dragons and there's princes and things like that. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go with that. But as it turns out, I gained an affinity for doing the science fiction version. And I get a wife who's more like a science fiction redhead, more Star Wars, belonging in
Mm-hmm.
the world of Star Wars redhead. Very shortly after that, uh, I learn about a redheaded character in the extended Star Wars series called Mara Jade, who basically works for, she's like a neutral Jedi. She's both. She works for, for Luke sometimes. She works for Vader sometimes. And I think she actually ends up marrying and going to the light side and marrying Luke in the original story. This might be a spoiler for for episode 8. I don't know. But
Thanks.
she's she's like a Jedi that doesn't have the same scruples that Jedis do, right? So she's kind of halfway Sith, halfway Jedi. Very paradoxical in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stunned when I saw that. I was like, how did I create something that eventually appeared in real comic book and book, novel lore for Star Wars? There's even been fan films made of it. Anyone who's a Star Wars fan knows the name Mara Jade. But that's not what I was working on. I wasn't trying to make a new Star Wars character out there. I just connected to one. And one of her highest attributes is that she's very intelligent. I said she can, fast talk her way through anything. Like, she's a fast talker. Like a smuggler can, has no problem dealing with anything in front of her. And that's kind of what, my first wife turned out to be. Someone who, studied law, society, and justice and women's studies. She was a perfect defensive, feminist. And so the skills she learned in university happened to be the exact ones to have a strong argument with me about the efficacy of her purpose in living a life. And so not only did I just find out why, she trained in a career to tell me why she existed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And, to a point, I was like, okay, great. Like, that is, I forgot about that. And that was, still the story today. She's still that person. Have I tried to change her in some ways? At the very beginning, when I first thought of law of attraction, I thought that was the golden ticket. But I don't undermine her existence because I've written something in my source code, that suggests her existence has a specific pertinence. And it does in a couple ways, but not very many. Mostly in, caring for my children. My first two children. So, is that an example enough? Or is it more the wanting a 300-page written statement? Because I'm going to make mine, and I'm going to make it public.
300 word.
300 word is the average.
Mm-hmm. But well, you
For
just said
some
300 page.
300 words, excuse me. 300 word is the average, and I was getting confused with the 300-page novel.
I know.
Um,
I didn't want everybody to think they were going to go through a 300-page Julian.
well, in the past, that 300 pages was very, very effective on me. But now, at this
Yes.
stage, it's really just 300 words is all that's needed. There are... people are not going to be people going to be familiar with this process, okay? It's like building a list of affirmations and that sort of thing. But I urge you to give it a shot and to put your heart into it. And the more that your heart is there, the more your heart will reveal to you how to fine-tune what's really going on. Normally, in the past, you do like fine-tuning saying, I can't have that. I never want to see that again. Like, if I can't have that, never want to see it. Some people are like that. The heart doesn't give you answers like that. The heart says, oh, we're going to have it. We're just going to maybe not include some things that you were thinking should be in there that you really, really don't want to be in there. You'd be upset with your own creation the moment you had it. That sort of thing. So
Right.
you'd be just as upset as right now if you got it. In fact, more upset. Right? So that's why you didn't get it. Because you're about to bring in a problem, You find out that Prince Charming is also an axe murderer. Who knows? So, go through trying it. Find an artistic expression. It doesn't have to be, like a paragraph. It can be like a poem. It can be a song. It can just some sort of methodology where your creative journey is involved, and you'll be able to find out more and more. And allow yourself to make edits. Like, don't close the book on how it takes place. You can do it on a computer. And if you want a great deal of intensity to the experience, to see the experience take place, you'll want to memorize it word for word. That level of integration is what we're looking at. Okay? So think of it as a play that you want to be in. And that play happens to take place in the middle of your life. And that play, you're rehearsing for the lines and auditioning for it. You get where I'm coming from? I know you do, Don.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting closer with this, but
Okay.
it wasn't as easy. It was like when you first explained it to me as you got the key to Ascension for Dummies, and it was almost like he dropped the book in my lap, and I'm like, okay. I'm still in the process of figuring it out, but I'm reading some of the comments here. So
Okay. But
okay, but is it true that if there are elements of the your original contract that are very key to your life's purpose, those elements will remain regardless of what you intend at this time?
correct. But you'll
Yes.
find out what that is more succinctly, because part of what you state that is not directly in opposition to what you've written will come true. So parts of what you say will come true. The parts
Hmm.
that do not specifically cite the conflict in operating order of importance.
Right.
Okay? So use it for research. And it's for dummies only in the way that it is as close to foolproof as I know anything to be
Right.
as a
Right.
process. Give yourself a couple days. Give yourself around a month before you can truly write it off. Because you
Well,
may be looking for it and keeping it away from yourself, but you can't even do that for more than a month.
right. We started late tonight, but
Hmm.
we probably have a couple of minutes. I don't know if you wanted to talk about um, the point about September and October
Right.
being
So,
micro.
okay, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, we did talk about it, and September and October are gonna be they're gonna be wild. I don't know how to
Hmm.
take the sugar off of that. Wild is a really good word for it. It's gonna be in some cases primal. In some cases it's gonna be fantastic. In some cases it's gonna be historic. Um, but it's going to be what encapsulates the word wild, both months. And they're going to be ones that are going to be more masculine dealing with it, and there's going to be a more feminine. The masculine is going to be first. September is going to be very like incidental situations to consider, or that you can't help but consider, like everyone's going through it. Um, and then in October, it'll be an attempt at balancing it out. Like, look, we just went through a major deal or something, a major change in the way we see things. Let's try to, not lose face, and let's try to keep the standards of life up. Let's try to not lose it after realizing that, some sort of carpet's been pulled out from underneath us, or that there's a whole new ball in game. There's a whole new ball team in town. And we don't know what to make of its influence. Just do your best to be the best that you are for yourself and for those around you, but for yourself first. Um, and so this insight download that I'm getting, it's available to everyone now.
Hmm.
See local retailers. Um, but it's not exclusive to me. This is an insight that will come through many different lenses and many different
Right.
people. I may be talking about it now, but maybe some people have already started talking about it. I know Andrew. We talked with him a little bit earlier. He's familiar
Yeah.
with this coming even before I was familiar. I just have a little bit faster tangent of experience to observe. His will be a little bit, coming around the corner. I'm sure of it.
Hmm.
And so everybody has their own sort of strategies for how they enter into a moment of energy. And September and October, I think I might have already mentioned that September is going to include sightings and should include sightings for everybody who is on the fence. If you're not
Right.
on the fence, don't feel jaded, you don't get a sighting, but the chances are if your neighbor's having a sighting, it should be pretty easy for you to get a
Yeah, I
sighting
was gonna
too.
say, just hang with people that
That
need
need
to
to
have
see us, that
sightings.
need to have sightings. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not a bad idea. I like it.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, there is supposed to be a lot of follow-up governmental discussion on the subject. Um, it's gonna become a more popular subject in the mainstream, and discussions are gonna happen all over. And you're gonna find a lot of people that are gonna have conflicting information real early on. So it's gonna be up to you to sort of like manage the environment of how you'd like to receive that information. It can be very trepidatious. It can feel like, I don't know who to listen to anymore. Well, guess what? You're not supposed to listen to everybody at once. You're supposed to be a bit pickier and choosier, something
Exactly.
like that. So you're supposed to take on the information exactly the way that you want it. Don't listen to Julien for all your, Pleiadian needs. Listen to other Pleiadians as it suits. Um, so
Ask the Pleiadians themselves. They're
as
happy to
I
talk to
go
you.
to the Pleiadians and send the question directly to headquarters. Yeah,
Yeah. But one other point, though, that you were saying that you see September and October being kind of a micro 2017 that
that's yeah. So September and October will flip over and do a bit of a slow motion version of the same thing, but a much heavier house cleaning of those 2 months that goes all the way till 2018.
right.
Okay, which makes 2017 look really, really weird. In fact, pretty much September going on. If you were to look at your life before September, you'd say, "Yep, we're in a weird place. We're in a weird,
Mm,
strange land." Um, so embrace it, and congratulations, I guess, are probably in order in some way because you couldn't really stand here listening to me if you weren't somehow involved in the same experience.
exactly.
Um, so I encourage conversations. You can leave comments on the in the comments section of this show's recording, and you can find me at julianwells.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. If I have anything to say, it's going to show up there. A lot of my videos when they go up, including the new show that we're doing on Saturdays, also appears there.
And this Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
our special guest will be our own Judy Jandora. I think she's in the chat room
It's gotta
tonight.
be.
I saw her. I saw her somewhere. So I'm excited about that.
Oh yeah.
We're going to talk to
Um,
her on Saturday night.
and I would say she's a hoot because she's got a lot of wonderful stuff to talk about. But I'd also take her pretty seriously because what she gets into is a really beautiful interpretation and insight. And that's pretty much why we're talking with her because she's got a whole nother language to describe much of the same things that that we talk about here, but that's kind of the big picture is to help us have more than one way that we receive our information and build in confidence. Um,
Yes. And,
so
and and if
mhm.
any of you saw the live Facebook stuff that we did when
Oh yeah.
I was at Julian's with Judy, you'll know that I won't have much work to do on Saturday night when Julian and Judy get talking. I can just sit back and listen. So excited about that.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
join us there, and this is
yes.
this coming Saturday night, Pacific, 6 o'clock p.m.
Mhm.
And it would be the same link as what got you here. And I believe that's gonna wrap it up for tonight. I mean, this is the beginnings of a big conversation. I think I would say, and I did my best to temper it from all the tangents that are contained within the exploration of life from this point of view. And feel like, Pleiadians helping me a little bit here. They help me, keep the bigger picture in mind. Because there's a lot of small picture we'll be getting into over the coming weeks.
No, and I think yeah, this there was a lot to this discussion tonight, and there was and it's really, I think, just an introduction.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll be really hitting on this and other aspects of what we were talking about tonight, I mean, more in depth as time goes on.
Yes. And
Yeah,
I would say, thank you everybody who's
thank you.
here participating and being a part of this. This is the time that things are getting rolling, and I'm very
Yes,
excited to share with you, what it's like for me, and have conversations from the perspective I'm holding. I'm here. You can book time with me. I encourage you even just send messages as well. I don't always read them right away, but you know I'm here and want to do this with everyone here. So,
Perfect.
but thank you, Crystal, for being in the chat room with Judy and meeting everyone. We didn't have the chat room here easy for me to access. The software was out of date, and I didn't know how to update it fast enough. But anyways, Don's gone, and I'm going out. Sayonara, everyone. Take care. Good night.